On Halloween night, the small town of Elmswood lay cloaked in fog. The streets were empty, except for a few carved pumpkins flickering on porches. It was the perfect night for something strange to happen, though nobody expected what was about to unfold. Mira, a quiet and curious girl of 16, was sitting in her room, watching the fog roll past her window. She had no plans to go out. Most of her friends were either at parties or handing out candy, but as she scrolled through her phone, a notification appeared. It was an anonymous message that read, "Come to the old Blackwood Manor at midnight. Bring no one." Her heart skipped. Blackwood Manor was infamous in Elmswood. Everyone knew the stories, how it was abandoned 50 years ago after a series of mysterious disappearances. People claimed they heard voices, saw lights, and even felt cold hands pulling them back if they dared to go too close. Mira hesitated, but her curiosity burned brighter than her fear. She grabbed her flashlight, a jacket, and headed out. The fog swallowed her as she walked toward the edge of town. Blackwood Manor loomed in the distance, a dark silhouette against the faint glow of the moon. The house looked almost alive, with its broken windows like gaping mouths and its sagging roof like drooping shoulders. As Mira approached, she noticed that the air grew colder and the wind whispered through the trees, carrying words she couldn't quite make out. When she reached the front gate, it creaked open as if it had been waiting for her. She hesitated again, her flashlight trembling in her hand. The message didn't say who had sent it. Was this a prank, or was someone inside? She stepped forward, the gravel crunching loudly under her boots. The front door of the manor was ajar, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. Mira pushed it open slowly, and the hinges groaned like an old man waking from a long sleep. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and dust. Cobwebs draped the corners of the room, and old furniture lay broken and scattered. Her footsteps echoed eerily. "Hello?" she called out, her voice barely more than a whisper. There was no answer, only the distant sound of something scraping against wood. She followed the noise, her heart pounding with every step. The sound led her to a grand staircase that spiraled upward into shadows. At the base of the stairs lay a small envelope. Her name was written on it in shaky handwriting. She opened it, her fingers trembling. Inside was a note that read, "You've been chosen. Find the mirror." Her pulse quickened. She didn't understand what it meant, but she felt compelled to continue. She climbed the stairs, each step creaking beneath her weight. The scraping sound grew louder, and so did another noise, faint whispers that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The hallway at the top of the stairs was lined with doors, most of them hanging crookedly on their hinges. Mira felt drawn to the last door on the right, which was slightly ajar. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was freezing, her breath visible in the dim beam of her flashlight. In the center of the room stood a tall, ornate mirror. Its frame was blackened with age, and its surface shimmered strangely, as if it were a pool of water rather than glass. Mira's reflection appeared in the mirror, but something was off. The reflection didn't move as she did. It stood still, staring at her with wide, unblinking eyes. She stepped closer, her hand reaching out to touch the glass. The moment her fingers brushed the surface, a cold, clammy hand shot out from the mirror and grabbed her wrist. She screamed and tried to pull away, but the grip was unrelenting. The reflection's mouth moved, though no sound came out. Then suddenly, the whispers from the walls grew deafening, a cacophony of voices shouting and pleading. The mirror's surface rippled, and Mira felt herself being pulled forward, her body halfway into the glass. Just as she thought she would be dragged completely into the mirror, the hand released her. She stumbled backward and fell to the floor, gasping for air. The room was silent again, but the mirror had changed. Instead of her reflection, the glass now showed a dark forest, its trees twisted and gnarled. Standing among the trees were shadowy figures, their glowing eyes fixed on her. One of the figures stepped closer, and a voice echoed in her mind. "You must come back. The door will close soon." Mira scrambled to her feet and ran out of the room, her flashlight flickering as she bolted down the hall. She reached the staircase, but the way down was blocked by a thick, black mist that seemed to rise from the floor. Trapped, she turned back and saw the shadowy figures emerging from the walls, their hollow eyes staring hungrily. Mira's chest tightened as the shadowy figures closed in. Their hollow eyes burned with a sickly green light, and their elongated fingers stretched toward her. The black mist behind her swirled, trapping her in a suffocating circle of fear. She had no choice but to run deeper into the house. She darted down a narrow hallway, her flashlight flickering weakly. The whispers grew louder, each word clawing at her mind. They spoke in a language she didn't understand, yet the tone was unmistakable, threatening, angry, hungry. Doors on either side of the hallway slammed open and shut as she passed, as if the house itself was alive and watching her. Mira's breathing was ragged by the time she reached the end of the hall. There, another staircase spiraled downward into complete darkness. She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder. The shadows were still coming, their twisted forms moving unnaturally fast. Without thinking, she descended the stairs, her trembling hand gripping the railing. At the bottom, she found herself in a basement that seemed impossibly large. The walls were lined with old bookshelves, their contents rotted and crumbling. Strange symbols were etched into the floor, glowing faintly. In the center of the room stood a large stone pedestal, and on it rested a black key. The whispers quieted, as if holding their breath. Mira approached the key cautiously. As her fingers closed around it, the symbols on the floor flared brightly, and the room shook violently. A deep, guttural voice echoed through the basement. "The key is not yours to take." A cold wind whipped through the room, extinguishing her flashlight. Mira's heart pounded as she fumbled in the darkness. Then she heard it, a low growl, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps. Something was in the room with her. She clutched the key tightly and stumbled backward, her free hand reaching for the wall. The growl grew louder, and the footsteps quickened. She could feel the vibrations in the floor as the creature approached. Her back hit the wall, and her fingers found a loose brick. Desperate, she pulled it, and a hidden door creaked open behind her. Without a second thought, she slipped through the door and slammed it shut. The growl turned into a furious roar, and the walls shook as the creature pounded against the door. Mira didn't wait to see if it would break through. She turned and found herself in a narrow tunnel, lit by a faint, otherworldly glow. The walls were covered in the same glowing symbols as the basement floor, but these seemed to pulse rhythmically, like a heartbeat. The whispers returned, softer this time, but more insistent. They seemed to guide her, pulling her deeper into the tunnel. Her feet moved almost involuntarily, the key in her hand growing warmer with each step. The air grew thicker, making it harder to breathe, but she pressed on. She felt that she was being drawn towards something, though she didn't know what. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened into a vast cavern. In the center stood a towering black door, its surface covered in intricate carvings that seemed to writhe and shift when she looked at them. The key in her hand pulsed, and she knew it was meant for this door. But as she stepped closer, a voice boomed through the cavern, shaking the very ground beneath her feet. "You dare to unlock the gate? You know not what lies beyond." Mira froze, her heart racing. She looked around, but saw no one. The voice seemed to come from the walls themselves. Swallowing her fear, she called out, "Who are you? What is this place?" The voice laughed, a deep, chilling sound that echoed endlessly. "I am the keeper of the gate. Beyond lies the realm of the forgotten, a place of no return. Yet you hold the key. Will you proceed, or will you turn back and face the shadows that hunt you?" Mira's legs trembled, but the weight of the black key in her hand anchored her. She stared at the towering door, its carvings shifting like serpents, coiling and uncoiling beneath her gaze. The cavern seemed alive, pulsing with an unseen force that pressed against her chest, making it harder to breathe. The voice boomed again, filling the air with a dreadful authority. "Make your choice, child. The key burns for purpose, yet the path is not for the faint of heart. Unlock the gate, and you shall enter a world where light dares not tread." Mira gritted her teeth, clutching the key tightly. She was cornered. Behind her, the growling creature waited. Before her, a choice that seemed more dangerous than anything she'd faced so far. But the whispers in her head grew louder, not threatening, but urging her forward. The shadows had called her here, but why? What lay beyond this gate? She stepped closer, her pulse hammering in her ears. Her hand reached out toward the lock, a blackened, ancient shape set in the center of the door. As the key slid in, it felt as if the entire cavern exhaled. The air around her shifted, growing colder. The key turned with an audible click, and the carvings on the door writhed violently. A low hum filled the cavern, growing into a deafening roar as the door began to part. A blinding light spilled out, but it was not warm or comforting. It was cold, harsh, and unwelcoming. Mira shielded her eyes as the door swung fully open, revealing a swirling void. A figure emerged from the light, tall and skeletal, wrapped in tattered robes that seemed to shift between reality and shadow. Its face was hidden beneath a hood, but its hollow voice resonated with power. "You have opened the gate, mortal. Few have dared, and fewer still have returned. What is it you seek beyond the veil?" Mira stumbled backward, her mind racing. I didn't mean to. I was called here. I don't understand any of this." The figure tilted its head, a dry rasp escaping its hidden mouth. "Called, you say? Then you are marked. The shadows do not call without purpose. Come, child, step through the gate and embrace your fate, or linger here, where the shadows will devour your soul." Behind her, the sound of the creature's furious pounding returned, the hidden door she had come through groaning under the strain. Mira's choice was made for her. With a deep breath, she stepped into the void. The air shifted again, colder and heavier than before. Mira opened her eyes to find herself standing in a dark, desolate landscape. The sky above was an endless swirl of gray and black clouds, broken only by faint, sickly green streaks of light. The ground beneath her feet was cracked and barren, littered with jagged stones and twisted roots that seemed to claw at the surface. She turned to look behind her, but the gate was gone. She was utterly alone. The whispers returned, but now they were clearer, more distinct. They spoke in a language she couldn't comprehend, yet the tone was unmistakable. They were beckoning her, pulling her deeper into this forsaken place. In the distance, she could see a faint glow, a structure that looked like a towering cathedral of bone and stone, its spires twisting into the sky. Mira began walking, the weight of the key still in her hand. She felt its heat growing as she approached the glowing structure. The closer she got, the more the whispers grew, until they were no longer in her head, but all around her, voices overlapping in a maddening chorus. As she stepped through the archway of the cathedral, the whispers stopped. The silence was deafening. The interior of the cathedral was vast, its walls lined with countless mirrors, each reflecting a different scene. Some showed forests, others towns, and some displayed dark, empty voids. At the far end of the cathedral stood a throne made of blackened bones, and upon it sat the skeletal figure she had seen before, its glowing eyes fixed on her, and it spoke in a voice that seemed to reverberate through her very bones. "Welcome, traveler. This is the realm of the forgotten, where those who pass through the veil are bound. But you, Mira, are an anomaly. You do not belong here, yet here you stand. Tell me, child, what do you seek?" Mira's voice trembled as she answered, "I don't know. I didn't want to come here. I just followed the whispers. They wouldn't let me go." The figure leaned forward, its skeletal fingers steepled. "Ah, the whispers. They are the voices of the lost, trapped between realms. They call to you because you are marked, touched by the shadow. You are a bridge between worlds, Mira. And now you must decide your role in this place." Before she could respond, the mirrors around her began to ripple, their surfaces shimmering like water. One by one, figures began to emerge, shadowy forms with glowing eyes, their shapes twisted and grotesque. They surrounded her, their gazes piercing. The figure on the throne gestured toward them. "These are the forgotten, those who strayed too far from the light. They seek release, but only you hold the power to grant it. Will you help them, or will you turn away and let the shadows consume all?" Mira's heart raced. She didn't understand what was happening, but something inside her stirred, a strange, inexplicable sense of responsibility. The key in her hand burned hotter, and she realized it was glowing faintly. "What do I have to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The figure's hollow grin widened. "Use the key to unlock their chains. Set them free, and the balance will be restored. But beware, for not all wish to be freed. Some thrive in the darkness and will fight to remain. You must discern the worthy from the wicked." Mira's grip on the key tightened as the shadowy figures closed in. Each one seemed to radiate an aura of sorrow and despair, but there was also a deep, unsettling hunger in their glowing eyes. The skeletal figure on the throne watched in silence, its gaze unreadable. The first figure stepped forward, its shape flickering like a dying flame. It reached out a trembling hand, and Mira felt a wave of anguish wash over her. The whispers in her head grew louder, pleading, begging her to use the key. She hesitated, unsure if she could trust what she was feeling. The key pulsed in her hand, almost as if it had a will of its own. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward and pressed the key against the figure's chest. There was a blinding flash of light, and the figure dissolved into a cascade of shimmering particles that drifted upward, disappearing into the void. The other figures watched silently, their forms shifting restlessly. Mira could feel their desperation, their yearning to be freed. But she also sensed something darker, lurking among them, something that didn't belong. One by one, she approached the figures, using the key to unlock their chains. Most of them vanished in a burst of light, their whispers fading into silence. But as she reached the last figure, she felt an overwhelming sense of dread. Its eyes burned brighter than the others, and its form was more solid, more defined. This one didn't plead or beg. It stared at her with a cold, calculating intensity. Mira hesitated, the key trembling in her hand. The figure stepped closer, its presence oppressive. The whispers in her head turned to screams, warning her to stay away. But the figure's voice cut through the chaos, low and commanding. "Set me free, and I will grant you power beyond your wildest dreams. Together, we can reshape this realm and the one you came from, or refuse and face the wrath of the forgotten." Mira's mind raced. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. If she set this figure free, she might unleash something far worse than the shadows that had hunted her. But if she refused, would she be able to find her way back? Summoning every ounce of courage, she stepped back and tightened her grip on the key. "No," she said firmly, "you don't belong here." The figure's eyes flared with rage, and it lunged at her. But before it could reach her, the key in her hand blazed with a brilliant light, and the figure was engulfed in flames. Its screams echoed through the cathedral as it was consumed, leaving nothing but a faint wisp of smoke. The skeletal figure on the throne rose, its bony hands clapping slowly. "Well done, Mira. You have proven yourself worthy. The balance is restored, and the gate shall remain sealed. But your journey is not over." The cathedral began to crumble, the mirrors shattering one by one. A doorway of light appeared before her, and the figure gestured toward it. "Return to your world, child. But know this, the shadows will always be watching. You are marked, and your fate is entwined with theirs." Mira stepped through the doorway, her heart heavy but resolute. As the light enveloped her, she felt herself being pulled back into the world she had left behind. The whispers faded, and the cold air of Halloween night greeted her. She stood outside Blackwood Manor, the fog thick around her. The house was silent, its dark windows staring back at her like empty eyes. The key in her hand was gone, but the memory of what had happened remained. Mira walked away, the whispers still faint in the back of her mind. Halloween would never be the same again.